So the materials you're going to need for this project are a canvas. Obviously, that's a good place to start. This is just a small canvas, 12 by 12, that I bought from Dollarama, which is a good resource. You're going to want anything that you don't mind getting paint all over as a palette, so you'll definitely need that. A variety of paints. Obviously, for doing landscapes, you'll want lots of different kinds of green, some yellow, white is essential, some browns, a little bit of blue for the sky, and then you're going to want some contrasting colors as well eventually, and you'll see in the demo, but I've got purple and orange. You'll need a rag to clean your brushes off in between using colors, and then a variety of paintbrush sizes. So you want one that's fairly large, one that's maybe medium sized, and then the one that you might be using the most is maybe one or two really small ones. Once you have all of the materials you need together, then you can put your canvas on an easel if you have one. I like to put a blanket up in my studio and just hang the canvas on a nail on the wall so it's nice and flat. I'm also tall, so it's nice to have it up higher. And then you're going to want to think about your landscape. So we're not working from any source material or anything. We are just going to imagine what it will be like. Don't worry about it being realistic or too detailed or anything like that, or not detailed enough. We're just going to go with our instincts, and it's just a nice, soothing, therapeutic way to make a painting just from your imagination. So first thing you're going to do is you can either start with the grass or the trees, the green area, or you can start with the sky. I'm going to start with the sky. So I take my big brush, and I just take, this is just straight up light phthalo blue, dip it in some water to make it spread a little bit more easily on the canvas, and just fill the top of the sky area to about where you think you might want it. One thing you can do to give a bit more variety in your composition is just to take the blue down into little valleys, and where the white is, there will be the treetops. And you can make this however you want. Just go with your instinct. If you have a picture you want to work from in mind, definitely do that. But we're just going to go from our imaginations right now. Smooth that out a little bit. Eventually we might want to put another layer over top of that once this one dries, but we're good for now. If you want, you can use a little bit of excess paint on your brush to kind of add some more layers down here on the ground. And that will only add to the depth of the color anyways. You won't really see the blue, you're going to be painting over it. Some of it might peek through in the layers, but we're not going to worry about that. Also try and think of your brush strokes as well. So around the tree line, try and keep your brush strokes basically vertical. It's not set in stone, but it helps create the illusion of depth in the painting. And then in the foreground, if you start off doing side to side, it'll give it a flat illusion. And then rinse your brush off in water. We're using acrylic paints, so it dries fast and it's water soluble. Don't get it on your clothes, you'll never get it out. So I'm wearing an apron, I recommend you do that as well, or just wear some old clothes. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a darker green I'm going to start with, and I'm just going to fill in the tree areas with that. If you kind of take your brush and do little side to side motions like that, it'll give a little bit of texture in there as well to work from. Try and fill in all the white little gaps as you can. If you don't do it this round, it's not a problem. You can do it in the following layers. I think I do the trees a little bit darker than the ground to start, because I think I maybe imagine the light source coming from behind, so the trees are in the front. And then take that same dark green, the leftovers, and you can do a bit more vertical texturing through that dividing line, just for now. And then take a little bit of a lighter green. You can use craft paints from the dollar store. You can use really good paints from the art supply store. It really doesn't matter, but in the long run, if you use cheaper paints and you want to make sure the paint, once it's finished, lasts forever, you can just put a coat of finish on it and it does the trick. So again, the side to side motions is a good technique for starting out. And the lighter green just adds some definition between the trees and the field. And then once you have that filled in, that's the first layer. Take as much time as you need. Obviously, pause the video if you want to work on it a bit more. And then we will just come back to this once it's dried. You can use a hair dryer, which I use a lot to dry the acrylic paint a little faster. Or you can just go take a break and have a snack or a cup of tea or something. So we'll come back to this in a few minutes when it's dry. Now that I'm looking at this, I kind of think I want to give it a bit more depth and interest as well. And I think I'm going to put a few trees kind of in front of that back tree line. Just going to put a couple standing together. Imagine your best Bob Ross narration right now. Very happy little trees. And that's probably good. So rinse your brush really well and then grab a smaller brush. And with that smaller brush, you're going to take a bit of the lighter green and you're going to go into the darker green background and just add little pointillism dots. So it'll kind of approximate the effect of leaves in the tree. Kind of an impressionist technique. Remember to keep loading your brush too. Frequently dip your brush in the paint because acrylic paint won't last too long and you want the little dots to really stand out from the background. And if you don't have enough paint on your brush, it won't. It'll just be a very thin layer and you won't really see it. If you're listening to music when you paint, this will end up leaving you making dots to the beat of whatever song you're listening to. And get used to this dot technique, because you'll be doing a lot of it over the tutorial for this style. Try and make your dots as varied as possible. I'm turning my brush a little bit, so just making the dots, because they're kind of oval in shape, trying to make them just go in different directions. Don't worry too much about making it perfect or having them even or everything or anything, because in nature nothing's perfect, and we're also going to be continuing to do more and more layers over top. You can sometimes go into the wet paint with more wet paint if you are really decisive with the dots and you really load your paint up. Like this paint's really wet right here, but you can still put some dots, but it'll start to blend a bit, as you can see, because the wet paint will mix together. And again, you can take the excess brush, or paint from your brush rather, and kind of scribble it in on the grass. Once you have the first horizontal layer of the ground done, you can go in different areas and do like a sideways scribble line, and it'll help just add more depth to the landscape. Try to just follow your instincts with it. Don't fuss over it too much. I find that if you just kind of surrender to the process and just go with the flow of whatever your hand is wanting to do, then the landscape will have a bit more personality and be more random and end up looking more realistic in a way. I'm going to get my smallest brush, and to the green I am going to add some yellow. And then in similar fashion to how you've done the horizontal scribble lines, go in kind of around them with little dots. We're trying to give a base of really green tones before we go in and add some more personality to it. So I kind of think of these as little clouds almost in the grass. I don't want them to be too uniform or too close together. So I kind of just start with the really loaded dots in the middle and then kind of just go around as the paint comes off your brush. And if you flip your brush around, there's more paint on the other end of it too. So you can use that paint to save time in loading up the paint from the palette. Get in between the trees there. The yellow is sort of just the bright grass where the sun is particularly shining on it, if it's sunny. If you want to do a gray sky, go ahead. It won't really affect the colors you'd use on the bottom. We're not going for a really like photorealistic style. We're just trying to express ourselves through color and just using the paint, which is really nice. I think that looks pretty good for now for the base, for the grass. You can take the same yellow and go up into the top of the tree line. Sort of think about where the light would hit theoretically. And if I'm usually around the outside of the trees on a sunny day, you'll find the light is shining more on those areas. So kind of add like a halo effect to the trees using this similar technique that you did in the grass just now. And you can add a few random illuminated leaves in the middle. As you're going, don't worry if you make any mistakes. My favorite thing about acrylic paint is it dries really fast, and once it's dry you can just paint over it again. Makes the process a lot less stressful and easier. After a while, the painting of these little dot brush strokes get kind of almost meditative. When I get to the bottom, I'm going to make them a bit more sparse so that it doesn't look like the leaves are going all the way to the ground. To give them a little bit more three-dimensionality, you can, after you do the halo effect around the outside, trees will grow forward, and on the branches will come towards you, and on those branches there are of course leaves. So you can kind of do almost little circular areas of dots, and that'll kind of represent like branches coming towards you. And then a little bit of yellow mixed with the lighter green. Kind of do a similar thing to those trees in the foreground if you choose to have done those. Some of that paint might still be wet, but that's fine too because you're blending it with the green anyways. If you're using a thicker paint as well, so like something in the higher quality area like golden paints that have a lot of volume to them, you can really add a lot of texture this way, but I'm just using craft paint for now, craft acrylic paint. And then while that dries, looks like as the sky dried, some of the paint was uneven. So I'm going to go in and just give it another layer, because as it dried, some of the parts that weren't as thick as the others are too light and it's not uniform. So I'm just going to go in and add more of the color to make it more flat. Careful not to get some of the tree color into the sky. So there'll be a lot of blending or waiting for it to dry and then painting over it again. And if you still don't like your sky at this stage, that's fine. Let it dry and then go back in and paint over it again later, how you like it. Okay, and then we'll take a break and let that dry. So now that that's dried, we have our basic background layer added. There's texture, there's a bit of depth, and now we're going to go in and add more depth. So we're going to take a break from the pointillism part for now, and I'm going to take a really dark blue, and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of brown. I'd probably put 2 parts dark blue, 1 part brown. And then I'm taking my medium brush, I'm going to mix them together, and then I really want to water it down. So when you're mixing the paint, make sure that you keep dipping your brush in the water and then mixing it into the paint until it's translucent. Better to make it more translucent than not, because then you can add more. It's harder to take away than add. So like that, it'll pool, but it won't drip too much. So with that, I'm going to go along the tree line on the bottom. It's dry, so you can use your fingers to kind of blend it if there's too much pooling of the paint. And then stick to the tree line and do the sideways scribble technique again. And you can go in with your fingers and blend it up, or use a brush, or really do whatever you want. But what you're trying to do is just add a bit of shadow around the trunks to give it a bit of depth. It's a little too dark, but we can go over it in a minute. So that was too dark for me, but it's still wet. So I'm going to go in with a little piece of paper towel and sort of clean it up a little. That's better. You want to still see the work you've done underneath. Okay. And then take that same watered down blue and brown mixture, and there's probably some shadow under the trees. Way too dark again. probably be a few little areas in the grass that'll have some shadow. So add that in as you like. A lot of it'll depend on just instinct and what kind of look you're going for, or what mood you're in, or music you're listening to, or whatever. But the point is that this is a good beginner exercise so you can practice the basic techniques, and as you work on it more, if you want to do more paintings, you can add more and more layers and experiment with that. And it'll be a good way to start painting and then eventually develop a style that you're really comfortable with. I like that level of translucence right there, that's good. Because I like it, I'm going to bring it back up into the trees. Make those yellow dots a little less garish. And the trees in the foreground will get it too. And because that's a really thin layer, it'll really dry really quickly, especially if you're under lots and lots of light like I am right now. So if you want to at this point, you can go in and add a bit more separation with the dark color. I want to separate these two trees a little bit. And then I think this tree back here is kind of getting lost, so do the same to that one. It's a little too dark, but that's fine. I'm going to go back to a small brush, different small brush, but only slightly bigger than the one I was using before. And I want to take that brown and blue mixture and this time get a bit more of the brown in there. Probably more than 2 parts brown to 1 part blue. And then just every once in a while in the background add little trunks. And since I have that dark color still, around the bottom of the tree line, I'm going to add, that's a bit too dark, but I'm going to add some darker leaves where the shadow might fall. Just a few here and there. You don't want to go overboard with the dark parts and cover up all the work you've done before, but doing that will highlight what you've done before. And just add a bit more depth. Go by what your instincts are telling you. If you think you want to go up higher into the tree line to blend it a little bit like I'm doing, then do that. If you like it the way it is, leave it the way it is. It's your painting. So once that's done, we had the first layer. We separated the colors in the planes. We did the different layers of dots over top of it to add texture. And then we went in again and added some shadows. And now we're going to continue to build the layers. And you can keep going and going and going and going and as long as you want for weeks if you want to, and keep adding the different layers. But we're just going to do maybe 1 or 2 more layers on top of this. So now that we have the basics of the greens down and the shadows, you can go in and start adding little details wherever you want. So I'm putting some neon green just because I feel like it on my palette, and some light purple. And I'm going to take my small brush again. I'm just going to go in the purple and just add a few dots here and there. Maybe it's clover, but adding a little bit more color like this is nice. It breaks up the simpler background that you have, and it adds a bit more life to the painting. You can also keep going in with more and more layers of green. You can make the grass a little longer by making longer strokes. I think that's enough purple for me right about now. So rinse your brush. You're going to go in for another color, especially contrasting colors like purple and green. And then I'm going to take some of the really bright green here. And then I'm going to add, just in fewer amounts, just the brighter green here and there. You can experiment with any color that you want. And as I said earlier, because it's acrylic paint, you can let it dry and easily paint over the parts you don't like, just using the same technique to blend it all in. At this point, I'm sort of just looking for some of the areas that haven't been too developed yet and go in with some of the brighter green. And that green's working really nice for the bottom part, so I'm going to add it into the trees a little bit here and there as well. It's a sunny day. We're going to keep trying to add variety of brush strokes as well, so they're not all facing the same direction. You can, it'll give a totally different effect to the painting. It'll make it a bit more abstract because nature doesn't really work that way, but we're not working from nature in this case, so you can really do whatever you want. I feel like the field might need some orange flowers as well, so I'm going to find some orange paint if I can. And I can't, so instead of orange, I'm going to do pink. And in this case, I'm going to use the end of my brush instead for these flowers. I'm just going to dip the end of my brush in, and then just use the other side to make little dots here and there. Some nice bright pink flowers in there. If you wanted to, with the purple and the pink, you can go in and do this same technique with white, orange, blue, any color that you want, and make it a field of wildflowers. You don't have to add any flowers at all. Or you can even do the same technique with different shades of green, and it'll just add more texture to your field. So we're just about done for this tutorial. Hopefully this gave you the basics of how you can create a landscape from your imagination and some techniques to execute it. And as you continue to practice at this, if you want to, you will learn that you can try different things, add more layers, take some layers away, and you can experiment with different colors. The possibilities are endless for whatever kind of landscape you want to make. So I hope you enjoyed this, and hopefully we can do this again. Have a good day.